Hello, everyone. This is Sarah from Mappy Hour, and I'm so excited to have you all here for our very first Intro to Camping class. And I just wanted to get started by saying hello and also just setting up some ground rules for us all. There are obviously chat features tonight, and I encourage everyone to throw your questions in there, say hi to the others who are here, introduce yourselves, and just be respectful and kind to everyone who's in there. We definitely want this to be a judgment-free zone, a place where everyone feels comfortable to ask all their camping questions. So that's kind of the rules part. And now to the fun part. I started Mappy Hour because I had moved to New York City and I knew I loved the outdoors and really wanted to have both things come together. And I do think a big part of the ethos of Mappy Hour is that the outdoors are for everyone, and that can mean people who live in cities or people with different skill levels or whatever that may be. So I'm really excited that we have this series, and this is the first of three, because learning to camp and learning to sleep outside is the first step in hopefully a lifetime of really fun adventures. And the last thing I'll add before I hand it over to Kate is that I didn't start camping until I was an adult. I think I was in my 20s when I first bought a tent. So it's also been a process for me, and I've just been learning along the way and am always still learning. So with that, I am so excited to introduce Kate. And Kate, well, she'll introduce herself a little bit, but fun fact about me and Kate is we've never actually met in person.
That's actually really true. I didn't realize that.
It's really funny because we're like internet besties, but it just shows the power of connection on the internet these days, which I think is really important. So with that, hello, Kate.
Hi, good to see you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm really happy you joined. My name's Kate. I'm based in DC. I'm a physical therapist and a health coach and a avid outdoor enthusiast. I joined Mappy Hour, I want to say 2016, 2017. And then I'm the type of person that when I join something, I then want to run it. So I became one of the 3 Mappy Hour chapter leaders, 2018, 2019. How long have I known you? Yeah, about that long.
Sounds right.
Sounds right. I went to like a couple events. I was like, I got this. I can lead this now. So I love Mappy Hour. This is our last event, which was our 5th anniversary of our DC event, back when we didn't have to wear masks and oopsies, when we didn't have to wear masks and we can be in person. There we go. Sorry, that thing will disappear in a second. What Mappy Hour is a when in the non-COVID times, Mappy Hour is a almost monthly happy hour series where we get together people who live in the city and like the outdoors to create an outdoor community. Like Sarah mentioned, it's hard to find people who like the outdoors in the city, and so Mappy Hour is a great place to meet up and learn and find adventure buddies. And so we started this series to try to get more people who are interested in camping to do that, because we're just trying to find new ways of connecting now that we can't meet up in person. So my experience, are you going to head out, Sarah, or are you going to be in the chat?
I am. I'm going to say one more thing.
Yeah.
I will be in the chat with everyone. So if anyone wants to say hi, or if there are any issues, like if you're having any issues with chat, my email is sarah@outdoorfest.com. So if for some reason you can't chat me, you can email me. And with that,
adios.
Good luck, Kate.
Thanks. All right. So I started similar to Sarah. Thanks, Megan. No pressure. I'm all alone. Or no pressure to meet up with Peter. Maybe that was it. So I was a Girl Scout, and that's where I first started camping and getting introduced to the outdoors. But I didn't really I took probably a 10 to 15 year hiatus, and then bought my first tent about 5 years ago and started to get back into it. And part of me getting back into it was finding community groups, whether it was through triathlons where we'd camp out before events, which isn't like the smartest thing to do because you're really tired, or rock climbing groups, or it's during Mappy Hour. And so I love camping. It's really kind of how I spend most of my vacation time these days. And I'm excited to share with you guys kind of the intros and how to get started. So to get a bit of a icebreaker because we do have the chat features, and I'm going to try to not get super distracted with them. But with the, if you guys could throw in, so if you can put in where you're based, so that way I can, if everyone's on the East Coast, because I know a lot of the East Coast stuff, I can cater it to that. So if you can throw in where you're from, that'd be really helpful. But then also a word or a phrase of the kind of experience you're looking for when you're going into nature. So for me, I'm often seeking disconnection with my real world, or you might be seeking or connection with other people. So a word or a phrase of why you're interested in camping and what kind of experience you want to have. And there is about a 30-second delay on the chat. And so I'm going to keep chatting and then see what people put up. If you can also include in the chat, what is your biggest barrier to camping? For me, when I was first getting started, it was people to go with and not knowing at all where to go. And through Mappy Hour and other things, I've then kind of broken down some of those barriers. So again, a word or a phrase to describe the kind of experience you're looking for. And then escapism. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then what is the biggest barrier you have currently to camping? Awesome. All right. So in today's session, what we're going to be doing, the first part is going over the options of amenities you have when you want to camp, what the bathrooms are, shelters are, all that stuff. We're then going to talk about the types of camping there is and where you can book it. And then we're going to end with outdoor etiquette so that you're going to be a good steward and keep nature wild. So when we are starting out, we always want to consider what kind of shelter we want to be in. So our options, we can be in a stone hut, like some kind of these are all camping trips I've done like within the last year, all around the DC area. The first one, so you can be in a shelter that is a actual structure that's permanent. This shelter is part of the Pacific Appalachian Trail Club system. You can book these primitive shelters, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And they provide you with, this one it was like early 1900s it was built. So these are permanent. They're huts. You're staying in a house. You can also stay in a semi-permanent structure, so a yurt. This is the inside of a yurt. Basically what it is a wooden frame with canvas on the outside. And when you open the windows up, they're screened windows. And so you're kind of in a giant screened porch. And so this is more permanent than a tent, but a lot less permanent than the cabin that's been there since the early 1900s. And then lastly, the other shelter option is your own tent. So bringing up something that's either canvas or vinyl is another great option. So figuring out what type of shelter you're looking for based on the gear that you have and the kind of experience you want to have. Then you have to decide if you want a bed or not, or what kind of bed you want. You need something to sleep with, to sleep on. So in the yurt, I did that in June because I wanted a bit of an escape during during kind of the lockdown of the pandemic, and I wanted creature comforts, and so I wanted a bed to sleep in, and that's what I got there. The upper picture is an air mattress, which is always an option when you're camping, and the bottom picture is more of an air pad. And the next class we're going to do is going to go through all the gear that you need and you need, or that's nice to have and need to have when you're camping. But these are lots of options of what you can have, and so what your preference is going to what your preference is going to determine the kind of place you want to book. So if you 100% need a bed or you're okay with an air mattress, that's going to make, you need to keep that into account when you're thinking of where you want to go. Then you got to figure out what kind of bathroom situation you want. Bathrooms are oftentimes the biggest barrier for people on the outside because they just get icky and you don't really want to go. So the public bath, what you have to ask yourself is what kind of bathroom situation you want to be in. Are you comfortable with a campground that has public bathrooms? In COVID times, do you want your own private bathroom? Do you need flushing toilets, which some campgrounds have, some cabins if you have running water, or are you okay with more of a latrine or a pit toilet? A pit toilet, which the middle picture is basically a semi-permanent porta potty. And so you can just imagine it's a pit that you go to the bathroom in. When they're taken good care of, they don't actually smell that bad, but sometimes they're not taken the best care of. Or are you comfortable without a bathroom? So best etiquette, the last picture is, this isn't my picture, I found this one on the internet. But if you don't have a bathroom, you actually need to bury any poo you do in the woods. And so are you comfortable with that, or do you need more of the creature comforts with the bathrooms? With showers, some campgrounds, so if you're in a cabin that is running water, obviously, usually you have a shower. Oftentimes campgrounds will have showers. The showers in the campgrounds, though, are kind of a bit grimy. And so for me personally, if I'm camping for a night or two, I don't shower and I use baby wipes to kind of just wipe everything down. And the griminess of the showers, it's like if it's been a night since your last shower, the bathroom's going to look gross. If it's been 7 days since your last shower, the bathroom's going to look super luxurious. And so it kind of is your personal preference on if you want to shower, if you don't. You can get baby wipes. You can also get, they're called dude wipes or other camping specific wipes that are just these bigger, really thick baby wipes you can use. And Sarah's actually going to link to, there are solar showers, which I've never used. But if you want to get really fancy, you could do a solar shower if you need a shower when you're camping. And as we go through, if you guys have questions, throw them up, and I'll pause after each section. Whoops, wrong slide. All right, there we go. The next thing to consider is how isolated you want to be. So are you comfortable in a public campground? And with isolation, I'll back up a little bit. With the isolation, it kind of depends on both safety and COVID. So for me personally, I'm feeling a lot better around people because my desire for risk is really low. So the picture of just the tent was on a solo backpacking trip of mine, and that sounds completely not in my comfort zone right now. And so I'm way more comfortable in a slightly more crowded campground. But are you looking for something there's people around, or are you looking to be completely by yourself? And there are a lot of, and we'll go through it in a book, but you can find a camping site or a yurt or a glamping experience on a farm somewhere, so you can be more isolated. So you should ask you and the people in your party, how much isolation are you looking for in this trip? Then the fun part, what do you want to do when you're camping? So all these were taken in the last like 6-7 months or so. Are you interested in doing some water sports? It is hot right now in DC. And so all my camping trips are around water right now. You can go kayaking, you can find like rivers to tube down, swimming holes. Are you interested in that? That is going to determine where you go because you want to be around water. Are you interested in straight up hiking? So you want to find some cool hiking trails to do? Or do you just want to kick it by the campsite and kind of hang out in a hammock and read a book? That is always an option too. It's a good thing to consider, especially if you have kids or people you're going with, of what kind of things are you guys looking to do when you're camping? All right. So any questions so far? So Sarah put up the solar showers. Peter's, the barriers are, good sites. I'm going to have a big listserv for that. Hi, Les. A lot of the logistics are really hard as I'm reading Les's comment. Cool. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to move on to kind of what our different options are, knowing all those amenities. So the first thing you can do is get a cabin. These are going to be houses in the woods. Most of them have running water. There's electricity. There's a bed. I think of these less of camping, more of you're kind of just adjacent to nature, which is absolutely fine. If you want to get out of your house, have a campfire, grill out, be in the woods, hear birds. If you're living in a city, cabins are a great option right now. You can find them. They're usually people just renting out their spaces. So you can find it on Airbnb or VRBO. Getaway House is another option, which are, they have like a great Instagram account, so you can check them out. But those are kind of, if you want more creature comforts, cabins are a great way to go. Again, not technically camping, but I won't tell anybody. Then we have primitive cabins. So with primitive cabins, you get a shelter, sometimes a bed, and not always including electricity or running water. And these you can find. So I mentioned that this one I was in was through the Pacific Appalachian Trail Club, PATC. There's other, Sarah can put a link to the ones near in New York. There are you can find them in different campgrounds too. They'll rent primitive cabins. They can be a great option if you don't have a tent and you need some shelter. In the summer, they can get really hot, and unless they have screens, you don't necessarily want to be in them with the windows open. And so I'm a big fan of them in the colder months and in the winter, because you can have like wood burning stoves and get all toasty warm in the hut. In the summer, they're not exactly my favorite. This is the inside of it, and it does look kind of like a murder scene because there's wood for, there's all these axes and saws for chopping wood. The primitive cabins are very little house on the prairie where you're chopping your wood with the wood burning stove. And yeah, they are, like I said, a nice option in the winter, not my ideal in the summer. The other thing to know is most primitive cabins that I've stayed in, and when Sarah and I were chatting before you guys got in, most of the primitive cabins we've stayed in have also have had a lot of mice. And so frequently you'll have a trash can that you have to store all your food in. And so just be aware that there could be critters around, because lots of people have stayed there and might not have had the best trash habits. If you're not scared off yet, we then have lean-tos. So lean-tos are a shelter that's overhead, and they're either, this is in Catoctin State Park near DC, and you can either have them that are, Les asked about the, yeah, it completely looked like a murder scene. It was a little scary. Les was asking about how commonly stocked they are. So it kind of depends on where you are. The Pacific Appalachian Trail Club ones are very well stocked. They frequently have dishes and pots and pans. You can find like photos and YouTube videos of them. You don't get a ton of information when you're going in. Most of them you do have to hike into. And so it's not like car camping where you can just park right next to the cabin. This one was about a 2-mile hike in. They also rarely have running water, and they're usually almost always next to a water source. So you do need to be able to filter and filter your own water, which we'll talk about more in the gear section, or if you just Google like water filtration while camping. So those are things to keep in mind. But yeah, they are usually really well stocked. All right, so back to our lean-tos. So like I was saying, this one was a 3-sided lean-to. There's also like these traditional or more traditional kind of just 2-sided lean-tos with 2 of the sides are open. They provide a shelter that's overhead. This one I could book because it was a national, or I don't know if it was because it was a national park, but I could book this one through the national park. It was like $8 to reserve. Other ones are first come, first serve. There's a lot of them on the Appalachian Trail because a lot of the through hikers use them. So just be aware that there might be other people around. You might not get it private if you're not reserving it. If you can tell, the orange in there is my tent because these don't have bug nets. And so this was spring. And so I put up the tent, ended up sleeping outside because I love sleeping outside as opposed to in tents. But I had it up just in case it got really buggy. And so once it starts to get a little bit colder, there's less bugs. Sleeping with just a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag is a great option. But I would still have a tent because you don't want to wake up with mosquito bites everywhere and have a really bad experience. All right, so next we have glamping. So glamping, what you get is also a shelter. A tent is usually provided, and there's frequently a bed. And this is really marketed towards you just show up and you have all the amenities. You often have to figure out food, and sometimes certain groups will do for a certain extra price, you get like a picnic basket full of food. But these can be a really great option if you don't have a lot of gear and if you want the planning to be at a minimum. They're usually at a private campground, meaning somebody's property. And so they rarely include electricity. They don't have running water. And you do need to ask about what the bathroom situation is. And you might not be completely alone because oftentimes they'll put up a bunch of tents and have it kind of as this big glamping like commune. And so just be aware of that. You can usually read the reviews. I'll link to where you can find these on the internet. But again, glamping is a great option. The difference between this and the yurt is The yurt has those big screened windows, and oftentimes these tents are thicker and there's no windows. And so the options are like doors closed or doors opened, especially on the East Coast with bugs. And so, yeah, and they get kind of hot. So you usually are only using them to sleep. You're not really hanging out in the tents, but they're a great option if you don't have a lot of gear and you just are trying to get away. All right. Then lastly, we have camping. What you get with camping is dirt to sleep on. That's what's provided. And the official campgrounds almost always have water that is drinkable, potable. We were debating as to how to say that word, potable water to drink, usually in like a spigot thing. And they almost always have bathrooms and they almost always have trash. And these are really important because the other option is dispersed camping or unofficial campgrounds. You can see these if you go on hikes, and usually within the first mile or so, you'll see an area and like the remnants of a fire ring, usually a flat area that like looks like people have slept there. And when you stay in dispersed camping, it can be really nice because you're very far away from people, but there's often not water, not bathrooms, not trash. And so if it's your first camping experience, I would go at campgrounds because it just takes the guesswork out of it. All right. So with all those options, I'll poll the audience again. What are you guys leaning towards? Like what sounds most appealing with your comfort levels, your first trip out there? What kind of trip do you guys want to do? And again, there's like a 30-second break. So I should sing the like the Jeopardy song or something, or 30-second pause until I can see the comments. My favorite thing right now has been camping with campgrounds, and especially campgrounds that I know, because my level of like risk aversion is really low. And so the idea of hiking into the woods and finding my own campground or doing backpacking is really not super interesting to me. All right. So places to book. Oopsies. Yeah, Sarah likes to go far away from other people. Straight up camping it is. All right, so we'll skip through this one real quick. So places to book, cabins, glamping, and private campgrounds. So if you are looking to be socially distanced from people, where you find those things are Glamping Hub, and feel free to take a picture of this link, this page if you want. Glamping Hub, Hip Camp, and Tenter all have, it's kind of the Airbnb for camping. And so you'll find just straight up dirt to sleep in on somebody's farm, yurts, glamping, all that stuff. You can also find it on Airbnb. My strategy though, because Airbnb doesn't have a search feature like these other ones do. And my strategy is to, I put the cost down like really low to like $25 a night. And that's when usually all the campgrounds pop up. But if otherwise, you kind of have to sort through all the features and it's a bit hard to find. But I have seen them and have booked twice camping through Airbnb. If you are doing private campsites, the two big things to ask about before you book is what is the bathroom situation and what is the drinking water, to know kind of like, do you need to bring your shovel or is there a bathroom there? And then with drinking water, if there's not a spigot, which there might not be if it's just somebody's farm, you might need to bring in all your water for drinking, for cooking, for putting out fires. So make sure you ask that. I was stuck at my yurt and had to like leave and go get water because I didn't realize I didn't have it and I didn't bring enough. All right. And then for more straight up camping, National Park Service is all the national park campgrounds. So if you do want to go to a national park, check obviously COVID recommendations right now. Recreation.gov is all the state and federal campgrounds. And then interesting, when I was on their website, they also have day use areas. And so if you're in a city and are trying to find an outdoor space to kind of do a distanced barbecue with people, you can always check out the day use areas there. Reserve America has private campgrounds, some state and some federal sites, but mostly private. And then KOAs, so Kampgrounds of America with campgrounds spelled wrong, is a national chain that are found. You can, now that you know to look for them, if you're driving down the highway, you'll see them everywhere. So they're these. It's a campground chain that has tent site cabins and RV hookups. And I have slept at KOAs. They're not my personal favorite. And it's actually the RV hookup is something to be aware of. So depending on the type of nature experience you want, and when I'm in nature, I want to hear the crickets and like all the nature noises. And if you're in a spot that allows for RVs, you'll oftentimes hear the hum of generators. And so it will say kind of what the RV rules are, or it will say tent camping only on campgrounds. And Campground of America definitely has RVs. So you do get that. And they are a little bit more expensive than some of the other spots, but they're good in a pinch. And if you're doing a road trip, which like questionable in COVID, and need a place to sleep along the way, KOAs are great in that regard. You should also look at your local town and county websites. So there's sometimes campgrounds that are a bit hidden that you find in those areas. So looking up your town, your county, or the county that you want to explore and see what the campgrounds are. A good old Google search also works for campgrounds. Sarah mentioned that KOA is also, they're a big family group. And so it's oftentimes not the most quiet experience because there are a lot of families around. Not that families are a bad thing, but if you're looking for peace and quiet, it's not always ideal. The last two are search engines that I found that basically are like the Expedia for campsites. And you can search by activity and by geography and like what's open. So those two might be a really good area, a good place to start. And then oftentimes they will then link to those other websites. But this is kind of where you find the campgrounds. Google has a lot of reviews. Campendium and Dirt has a lot of reviews. The national and state, the federal and state campgrounds are almost always really well done with water and bathrooms and trash collection. So I'm usually fine going to those. They will sometimes depend on, you might not always know the level of privacy. Like sometimes the campsites are really on top of each other and other times they're really spread out. So check out, like Google it, look up reviews, look at photos to see if it aligns with what you're looking for. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a pause and we're going to go into the next section is outdoor etiquette and how to be a good steward when you're outside. Do you guys have other questions, and what are your other questions about booking and the campgrounds and kind of where to get started? And I'll wait a couple of seconds to see if you have other questions. "30 seconds is a long time to wait when I know I'm alone on camera." All right. I'll get started with the next ones and I'll keep them up there so I can check if you guys have the questions or if you have any questions. Okay, so outdoor etiquette is based on the concept of leave no trace, which basically means that whenever you go into nature, there should be no evidence that you were ever there. So leaving no trace that you as a person were in that outdoor place. It's broken down into 7 major principles that we're going to talk about. And these are like I mentioned, they're really good outdoor etiquette, but you don't really know them unless you've been in the outdoors or have gone through scouting. And I embarrassingly made a bunch of these mistakes when I first went out because even though I went through scouting, I didn't realize some of this stuff. And so if you are outside, you're new to outside, you're with people who are new to outside, it is important to make sure that you aren't damaging nature so it can continue to be there for a while. So the first concept with leave no trace is you want to plan ahead and prepare. What that means when you're camping is you want to check the weather. Know what you're getting yourself into. Is it a tropical storm coming? Like what is coming? There's lots of good apps that you can check Doppler forecasts, but really know what's coming. You also don't want to assume that you have cell phone service, because I've often gotten to campgrounds, have had no service, and can't figure out where I want to go hiking. So download maps ahead of time, whether it's on Google or other apps related to hiking, to make sure that you know where you're going. You always want to pack enough food and water, both for camping and for hiking, because oftentimes we hike when we're camping, not always. For the water when you're camping, again, if you're at a campground that you have a spigot, what I do is bring 1 or 2, or I usually have 2-gallon water jugs. And then once I've drank those, I just fill it up with a spigot. And that way at my campground, I always have 2 gallons of water for the fire, which we're going to talk about. With hiking, the etiquette is, and I wrote it down to double check that I got the numbers right. What you want to do is have a 1/2 to 1 liter of water per hour that you're hiking. Most of us hike 2 miles an hour. So what that means is if you're going on a 4-mile hike, you should have about 1.5 to 2 liters of water. If you're going on an 8 to 10-mile hike, you should have like 3 to 4 liters of water. So a 1/2 or a liter, a 1/2 to a liter of water per hour, or about every 2 miles that you're hiking. You don't want to go hiking, get so dehydrated, and then have a horrible camping experience. It's hot in the summer too, so drink extra water if you're out in the summer. Sarah put down the links to her favorite apps with things, and Megan asked, are the Leave No Trace principles labeled? So Leave No Trace principles are actually like global, what we should all be doing whenever we're in nature. So no, it's sometimes labeled, but we're going to go through it so that way you guys know exactly like what you're supposed to do, even if there's not a sign. The next thing we want to do is always have a first aid kit. I was camping last weekend, and my girlfriend just always assumes I have it, which I did, but she burnt her finger while making a fire, and I had all my little burn salve and stuff. So your first aid kit should have basics for scrapes and burns, bee stings, those kind of things. If you're allergic to bees, hint, my brother who's on this call, have your EpiPen with you, because like those are usually the things that happen when you're in the woods. So be prepared for that. You also want to let people know where you're going, especially if you don't have cell phone service. So let people know, tell them I should be back about this time. And that way, if you go missing, if you don't come back, they know where to look. If you didn't tell anyone where you're going and you escaped into the woods, that's not the most ideal situation. You also want to be aware of any regional camping restrictions. This is more if you're doing the dispersed or like not official campgrounds. There's some rules about how close you can camp to water, at what elevations you're allowed to or not allowed to camp. So if you are doing it on your own, you do need to look up what the regional camping restrictions are. The next one, I didn't know this one when I was first starting, and I got not yelled at, reminded to do this one well. So we also want to travel and camp on what we call durable surfaces. What that means, if you look at the picture, there's an area that is clearly where a tent should be, so that the dirt spot, and then there's the grass and some wildflowers. You don't want to camp or hike and step on all the grass and shrubs, because over time that whole hill is going to look like dirt. So you want to stick to putting your tent up where it's obvious other tents have been up, or where there's dirt, not little shrubs, not moss, not tiny little plants. And so we don't want to step on them. We stick to the trail. If it's a really cool overlook, we don't want to kind of take those tiny little trails that step on everything. We want to stick to the trails that look like trails. All right, with trash. The phrase and the signs you'll see everywhere is pack it in and pack it out. So every single thing you bring in, you should always bring out. This is one of those situations where you should leave it better than you found it. Almost every single time I've gone camping, or excuse me, every single time I've gone hiking, I've always found trash. And so picking up random trash pieces when you see it. Trash should be stored in bear bins or in your car. So that bottom picture is what's called a bear bin, or a bear-proof trash can. And you kind of put your hand in the undercling part, and there's a little lever. And so it's bear-proof, so the bears can't get in. And bears and other critters, but like mostly bears because they're really scary, are the reasons that we care a lot about how you store your trash. So the other thing we don't do is throw any biodegradable food in the woods. So for example, if you're hiking along and you're eating your apple and you think, oh, I'll just throw my apple core into the woods. What happens is a bear comes along, eats the apple, and if enough people do that, the bear then learns, if I sit right here, people just throw me apples. And so the bears will then come a heck of a lot closer to the trail. Similar to campgrounds, we don't want to feed any wild animals. So we do want to store all the food properly. There's a phrase that a fed bear is a dead bear. And what that means is that once a bear realizes that they get food where humans are, they will come back to that spot a lot. And what ends up happening is animal control is called and the bear is shot if it comes too close to people. So even if it's biodegradable, throw it in the trash, throw everything away. Everything you bring in, you need to bring out. I've had way too many close bear experiences and I'm like petrified of bears. And I think they like know it and they come towards me. No one go hiking with me. The next concept is leave what you find. So there's an adage that says, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footsteps. What this means, if you're walking by and there's all these wildflowers, don't pick them. Because if you pick them, then they're not there for the next person. There's a trace that you've been there. If you're on a river and there are these beautiful river stones, don't take one, because over time, all the river stones go away and the riverbed erodes. So you really should not be taking anything from nature, no souvenirs, just take pictures and just leave footsteps. Ideally, though, not on the shrubs. All right, so the next one is fires. On the East Coast, we don't have as many fires as many wildfires as there is in the rest of America. But that being said, you still want to be really, really careful with fires. You should know what your local fire restrictions are, whether or not you actually can have a fire. These are not always well documented. Especially, but they oftentimes are, but just be aware of what the fire restrictions are. If you're at a campground, it will oftentimes be well documented. But if you're doing dispersed camping, you should know if you're allowed to have a fire or not. We always want to use fire rings. We do not want to make our own fire ring. So the fire ring is like that stone or a metal thing that holds the fire, and there'll be evidence that other people have made fires there. Use it. That's where you make fires. You also don't want to bring in your own firewood. What ends up happening is, and the adage is there, the phrase that Leave No Trace uses is buy it where you burn it, which means if you have firewood at your house, there could be bugs in the firewood. And when you end up bringing that into the woods, they're an invasive species and can destroy a lot of the trees. So you only want to get local firewood. Either they'll sell it at the campsites or they'll sell it in stores around. Or you can buy treated firewood. They have it in a lot of the grocery stores in DC. The perk of treated firewood is I don't know how they treat it, but it like burns really, really quickly. So you can feel like a master of making the fire because it like instantly lights up because it's super dry as opposed to the wood that you're getting in other places. But don't bring your own firewood, get it there or get it on your way there in the same forest system. You want to always have water nearby. Like I mentioned, I always have 2 gallons of water at least sitting on the picnic table right next to the fire. But you need, whether it's a bucket or whatever it is, you always need to have water just in case the fire does leave the fire ring. You never want to leave the fire attended. I ran into this last weekend when I was camping, and both my friend that I was camping with were both really afraid of bears, and walking around alone at night is not ideal. So the sun set, and we both needed to brush our teeth, and we looked at each other, and we're like, so one person had to stay, one person had to go with their flashlight, scared of everything that like cracks and rustles in the woods, to walk to the bathroom, brush our teeth, walk back, and then the other one walked and came back. The other option we would have had is to completely extinguish the fire, but we would have never left the fire sitting there unattended because you never know what's going to happen. You also want to extinguish the fire completely. So at the end of the night, you pour your water on. It makes like the most Oh, the sizzling sound is so satisfying. You want to spread out the ashes and continue to pour water on it until it stops sizzling. 2 camping trips ago, embarrassingly, at the end of the night, we put out the fire, went to the bathroom, came back, and I'd only used like a half a gallon or a gallon of water on it, and the fire had relit. And I was really embarrassed. I was like, oh, I did a horrible job, and I put the fire out again. Shame on me. I should have put it out more and obviously not left it unattended, but it's an example of if you're going to bed, you need to have that thing completely not hot because it can reignite. All right. Wildlife is really wild and we want to respect it. So we want to keep our distance regardless what it is. A lot of the bigger creatures, we obviously want to keep our distance with because like they can hurt us. But even things like deer or squirrels or chipmunks or whatever it is, we want to keep our distance. If the animal changes its behavior because you are there, you are too close. And frequently what happens, so I go to Shenandoah a lot. There's tons of black bears, which are not the like scary grizzly bears, but I don't like seeing them in the woods anyway. If there's a bear eating and you yell, so it looks up and takes its picture, over the summer, if that happens all the time, the bear won't eat enough. And so we don't want to interrupt the animal at all. We don't want to change its behavior. We want to keep our distance. If they move to get away from us, we don't want to, like, we were obviously too close. Animals is one of my biggest fears personally when I go into the woods, and it's something I still have to like give myself the pep talk when I'm by myself. And I'm doing a class in 2 weeks all about the flora, which is the plants, and the fauna. Did I mix that up? Yeah, flora, plants, fauna, animals that can hurt you in nature, and learn best practices. But the best practice you can do is just don't get close. And if you see it, back away. If you see a bear on the trail, you're turning around on the trail or walking, like giving it a huge wide berth to get around it. All right. The last leave no trace principle is we also want to be respectful of other visitors. So when you're hiking, there are right of way rules. So whoever is going uphill has the right of way. If you're on a trail with mountain bikes have the right of way over hikers. If you're on a trail with horses, mountain bikes, and hikers, horses have the right of way, then mountain bikers, and then hikers. If you're going downhill, you're just the lowest person on the totem pole. The current what I've noticed when I've gone hiking and camping, etiquette when you see somebody on the trail in COVID times is putting your mask on or putting your shirt over your face and like turning your back to the people. So you can like say hi to them and still chit chat, but it's this kind of funny, weird thing that as you're hiking along, the person who's going down the hill will just put their mask on and like give you the cold shoulder, which is awesome. And so that's what the current practices that I've seen. People have been, in my experience, decently respectful with if I put my mask on, other people get it. And so they'll either pull their shirt up or put a mask on. We always want to keep pets leashed. I know it's really tempting if you have a dog. Why you want to do this? So if you're in an area with bears, what ends up happening is the dog can run to the bear and then the dog can bring the bear back to you. And so you don't want to do that if there's any bears in the area and if your dog is not really well trained. So keep your pets leashed. You also don't know who is hiking and has kind of phobias of dogs or other dogs that might be aggressive if your dog is off leash. And it might happen 1 out of every 10 times or 1 out of every 100 times, but you don't want it to happen. And so keep your pets leashed, again, unless it's super, super trained, but most of the dogs aren't super trained. So please keep your pet on a leash. And then be respectful with music and with drones. Regarding music, it's fine to hike with music. I get it. If you want to do that, like go for it. Some people enjoy nature for not having music. So if you're on a really, really crowded trail, you might not want to be playing it. But if you're alone in the woods and it's making you more comfortable, go for it. Similar to your campground, that most of them have quiet hours and most people don't love having music blasting. So just be respectful of who's around you. Yeah, be nice to people. Drones, if you're taking photos or if you're using drones, taking photos with drones, be respectful. They're super annoying. They're like this. Someone had it at the campground last weekend. I'm sitting in my hammock reading my book and there's like this buzzing thing happening. You have to know what the drone rules are. In DC, I'm really lucky because I don't like listening to drones, and you can't have drones in DC, and you can't have them in any of the national parks. I needed to check if you can have drones where you are. The reason you aren't allowed to have drones is that if there's any search and rescue crews going with helicopters, the drones can cause the helicopters to crash. So if there's a search and rescue and they see a drone, they have to everyone has to land and they have to wait until the drone is discovered and who it is. And so that is why it really, really matters not to have drones, is for other people's safety, not just because I find them annoying. They're also cool. You get really cool photos from them. Just be respectful with them. And then, like I said, masks and social distance. I have found it at campgrounds really easy to stay socially distanced. I'm going camping with only one other person in the giant campground, separate tents, or giant campsite, separate tents. I'm finding most people at the campground pretty respectful of it. And so hopefully you have similar experiences. All right. So I covered a ton. Any questions about anything? So whether it's specific to kind of where to book, best practices, some basic gear stuff. Like I said, I am going into gear more next class, but if you do have some easy questions, I can answer. Best practices when camping, when you're in nature, throw it up in the chat. Thank you guys for sitting through. It's so, I enjoy public speaking, and it's so weird to do it when I'm like sitting in my bedroom talking to a screen and not able to see all the faces. So I appreciate you guys bearing with me through this COVID Zoom or COVID experience of this is how public speaking is now. Sarah, you want to hop on for Q&A?
Hi.
Hi, girl. How are you?
I am so good. I was actually just Instagramming a few of your quotes.
Oh, lovely. Fantastic. I can't wait to see what I'm tagged in.
I want to make sure everyone who's not here feels a lot of FOMO.
As they should. Megan asked, what are the 4 to 5 cooking gear essentials? So that is going to completely depend on what you want to cook. When I go car camping, I need some way to boil water so I can make coffee. And so if my number one cooking gear, I use a camp stove, which is a gas tank with this little stove on top that you light, and I can quickly boil water. You don't have to have, if you don't have that, it's just someone needs to go out and get coffee, or you bring cold brew or something. But that is my number one cooking essential. Otherwise, you can do a ton with just tinfoil and a fire. And so if there's not a grill, using tinfoil is great. Sarah, what do you like to use for cooking gear?
Yeah, so I'll drop this link in. I was just looking for it. It's an MSR kind of cook set. I think it's about $100. And I got it. So I think I started all of this about 10 years ago, and I still have all of my original gear that I got. And this was the cooking gear that I got. It basically, let me put it into the chat, but I would say, oh my gosh, this is a long link. What I like about it is everything fits really well together. So even if you don't know if you're going to do backpacking and need something super compact, it's just nice to be able to pack something that is compact, and it has kind of 2 of everything. So 2 mugs, 2 bowls. And I use a pocket rocket, which is a type of stove that's super small. So my pocket rocket will fit inside this as well. So I just put that in there, but that would be, I think, my recommendations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of all the essentials.
Yeah. But then otherwise, I mean, if you think about barbecuing, you want to bring
yeah.
tongs, you can do, I've made so much stuff in tinfoil because that's just what I've brought. I've also done it with boiling water. So the person I'm going camping with now, we don't share food because of COVID. And so I'm doing my own food, and it's a lot. And when I'm by myself, I'm not going to make this crazy meal. And so I do a lot with boiled water, and get the stuff that you just add water to things, add hot water, let it sit for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and you have food. So I care most about boiling water, but if you enjoy cooking, it's a knife, cutting board. I'll give you 5. Tin foil, clampy tongs, and something to boil water for coffee for me.
And gas.
And gas. Yeah.
And I will say one thing that I kind of learned along the way is once you start camping abroad, you cannot pack gas.
Yeah.
So that becomes a thing where you have to figure out where to get fuel for your stove once you arrive in the place. So just a heads up for once you get really into this and start traveling the world.
When are we going to be able to travel again? That's going to be amazing.
Of us are allowed to leave this country. That is a small complication.
Slight complication.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Les asked, what are the red flags or green flags when checking details about a campsite online? I use reviews. I will look at photos. It depends like what your make or breaks are. I'm fine with pit toilets. And so if you are like, I need flushing water, make sure there's a photo of a bathroom. Otherwise, I kind of just look at what the reviews are and what the campsites are. And usually I care more about the activities that I'm doing than the campground quality, because the worst campground quality will just be crowded because it's just like dirt on the ground. So like it's not going to be like this was cleaner dirt and dirtier dirt. So I typically just look at, if you care about bathrooms, what the bathrooms are, and then how close it is to the things that you want to do are the things to really look out for. But then as I say that, the things to look for if you're booking at not official campgrounds. So any of those websites that are people's houses, drinking water and bathrooms are the 2 big things to look for.
Yeah, I would say water is the biggest thing for me. I guess if you're at a built campsite, then that's a little bit less concerning. Yeah. But I actually have been hearing stories from people who have been camping during COVID where the water is turned off. So just which is crazy, right? Triple checking what the water source is and whether or not you need to just carry in your own water. I would say that's the biggest thing for me. And then kind of like what Kate said, I always like to look for when it's a campground, or we actually use Hip Camp a lot. So with that too, you can tell how many sites the property owner has. So some will be like 15 sites with a maximum of like 20 people at each site, and you can tell that would be really crowded. Or if it's a private campground, you can just look up and see how many sites there are. So I usually just take a look at that, see how close together they are, and if I have options, I'll usually obviously pick the one where there are less people.
Yeah. What are the things that when you first went camping that you wish you knew, or that like you learned when you went along, Yeah.
I would say the bear stuff was a big learning curve for me. It's definitely like as you go from more official campgrounds where you have a car to backpacking, learning to hang a bear bag or planning to carry a bear canister with you it's a really big thing. And that's, I think you said this, but like there are places where you have to carry a bear canister. It's not optional. And so my first backpacking trip was in Yosemite, and we got there and they're like, you have to rent these and carry them. And we had to like unload our bags, repack them. Things were like hanging off the sides and the front because we didn't have any more space. It was super heavy, and
yeah. To not scare people, the reason in Yosemite that mattered is those are brown bears or grizzly bears. On the East Coast, we don't. What? Aren't
just
they the same thing?
Yosemite.
Is brown?
No, grizzly.
Oh.
Grizzlies are like,
it's
okay. But yes, it's fine. There's lots of bears.
There's lots of bears. Those are the scarier bears. The black bears will like, yeah, I don't know if there's like when there's been a person mauled by a black bear, like it's not, and that's what we have on the East Coast. But Yeah, if you like pick up its baby, or go to try to pet it, it's like not gonna like you. Otherwise, they're just scary because it's a bear, and you're like, holy shit, that's a bear. But at most of the campgrounds, so like if there are a lot of people around, there's no bear. Where it's an issue, if you are all alone in its territory, it is not used to someone there, and you have like your delicious hot dogs that are just sitting on the ground, the bear, or in your tent, like the bear is going to come explore because it smells food. But in campgrounds, you keep all your food in your car, you keep trash in the gear, and I've never ever had any issues with bears at a campground that's a designated campground. I've only seen them when hiking. I don't know if you can agree or disagree.
I saw in Yosemite.
Okay.
There's a big bear problem in Yosemite, but other than Yosemite, I have not seen any bears at a campground.
Yeah. I think my biggest learning thing was how nice it is to sleep on not the ground. So like the first couple times I went camping, I think I used a yoga mat and like a bunch of blankets, and I'm just sleeping on the dirt, and that doesn't feel good. And I was like 25 and I still was like, this feels horrible. I hate this. And so really investing in a good sleep system and having like a good air pad to sleep on, I have found like kind of yeah, that's been nice. And if you're car camping, I mean, I've recently splurged on if you follow my Instagram, on a giant tent, and just so I could put an air mattress in. And that was like complete game changer because I had like the best night's sleep ever with my air mattress.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll put in a tip these are my 2 air mattress tips. One is make sure you have a patch, because if you accidentally and they're like, really cheap, they're a few bucks, and you can just look up like, patch kit for an air mattress. If you accidentally put your air mattress on the wrong rock and it pops, then it is completely useless, and it's very easy to patch yourself. Very light to bring a patch. So I actually put a couple extra patches in my first aid kit, and then I just like forget, I don't remember every trip to pack them. They're just there. And then the other thing is actually for the ladies out there. I had the first sleeping pad I got was this super plush one, and I was so excited, and it ended up being really straight and narrow. It was very obviously made by and for men. And so my second sleeping pad that I invested in had like a more curvy shape, and it's a lot more comfortable. So I would say, especially for women or people with curvier bodies, like look at the actual shape of the sleeping pad as much as you look at like the,
how thick it is. Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Do you feel like you can go camping now, or are you still really nervous? And if you are nervous, what are some of, besides if we scared you about the bears, what are like, are there any hesitations, or do you guys feel like positive about like booking camping for next weekend? Again, the 30-second delay.
I know. Where was your first camping trip, Kate?
I did it as a Girl Scout, so I don't remember because I was a child and I don't have any memories of being from childhood. And then I used to go, I had friends who would plan hiking trips, and then we would do dispersed camping where you'd hike in a mile, find a site. And the first time I did it, again, I had a yoga mat. I didn't even have a backpack, and I had like a Vera Bradley tote bag that I just walked in a mile. And yeah, I feel like I had like one of those heavy duty camp chairs that I brought in that I borrowed from somebody. And it was, yeah. Then I survived, and I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, like, I mean, that's definitely harder to carry a tote bag than it would be to have like a nice backpack, but there's so much camping gear that you don't need for your first trip.
100%.
You can go with a tent and a sleeping bag and a sleeping pad and first aid, and all the, the basic things, but you don't need the camping chair.
No, yeah, you don't need. I just was a diva and was like, where will I sit? It was my little Vera Bradley, and like,
yeah, I wish you had a picture of that. Sounds awesome.
I wish I did too. Has it been harder booking campsites during the COVID times due to the increased demand? So I've only been to one campsite, and I've just been multiple times because I love it. And it is first come, first serve, and it has only been opened for a month. And when I was talking to the campground host last weekend was the first time it was ever completely full. So I think cabins are really, really booked and popular right now in the like yurt glamping stuff. But unless people like camping, I don't know. I haven't seen a crazy, crazy uptick. It's also just summer and people camp a lot in the summer. But I haven't noticed a huge difference. I don't know. Have you, Sarah? I feel like you might have done more.
Yeah, I think the New York area is definitely seeing, and I think less is in West Virginia, so this might not even be relevant. But for our Brooklyn team, there's definitely been an increase in people camping. But I think kind of like what you're saying, it is the cabins, also the more popular like state campgrounds that everyone knows about. And so when I'm looking, I'm a total last minute camper. I like to book like the week before because I am not a huge fan of camping in the rain. So I just like wait till I have the forecast and then I go. And we've been using, like you said, kind of those county websites. So the more like local parks that have campgrounds and Hip Camp. And that's been the most successful for like that last minute within a week booking.
I feel like I'm just living my life last minute. A week is like what? How do you know what's
Yeah,
going to
can you
happen at
even
the end of a
imagine?
week?
Yeah.
I'm like, I booked my last because it's first come first serve. I like texted my friend in the morning. I was like, "We going? All right, cool." And like put everything in my car. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Anything else? I feel like I have this weird lighting now because it's nighttime, and so I just have spotlight on me. Yeah, if there are no other questions, I will send an email with all the links and you guys can respond to that email if you have specific questions. Like I mentioned, or like we mentioned, there's 3 of these. So the next one is Gear 101, which is next Thursday. There is a early bird special. So if you sign up now, you get $10 off. Yay, sign up. It's cheaper. And then the week after that is my personal favorite. I'm going to tell you all the times I get scared in the woods is mountain lions, bears, ticks, oh my. And it's all about all the things that could hurt you and are scary and what are best practices so you be safe when you're in nature. And if there's other things you guys are curious about, we're playing around with these classes because we're just trying to find other ways to connect and educate now that we're not in person. And so if there's other topics that you think would be really useful, I'll put a link where you can kind of fill out a little survey and let us know because we are just trying to figure out how to do this in the COVID times.
Yeah, and Kate, I'll for the third one, I will share my bee sting story from last weekend, which
I saw that on Instagram.
I've been sharing on Instagram.
Stung, and then it blew up because I think you might have done something
I went swimming in a lake. Don't do that. There's a freebie for you guys. Do not go swimming in a lake with an open wound
because it gets infected.
There's such a thing as too much nature.
Oh my gosh, it's scared. It's so interesting with COVID, how it's affecting I don't know if you're having the same thing, how it's affecting what risks I'm comfortable with and like what certainty I want and what certainty I don't want. And I'm so much like, I'm already quite a jumpy person in nature because like bears, but I'm so much more jumpy and like my anxiety is so much higher. And I was hiking or not even hiking. I was like walking around and a snake went over my bare foot because I was in sandals. Like this was 2 camping trips ago. And then last camping trip, every time a leaf touched my foot, I like jumped in the air. And it's just interesting how how my risk has changed and what my levels of tolerance of discomfort is like really low right now. I want very
and just like all our general anxiety levels or the baseline is way higher anyway. So I think
yeah. And so and that is something to keep in mind too when you are doing trips like this is like whatever it is to make it easier, especially if it's your first camping trip in a while, because like I've been camping. I slept outside almost 30 days last year. And last weekend, I'm still like sleeping with my knife right next to me. And I'm like jumping at every sound because my anxiety levels are so much higher. So get comfortable. Like if you can go comfortable, it's not cheating. Like do it so that you have a good experience so that you want to do it again in the future. Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
Great. Well,
Thank you, Kate.
thank you for having me. Thank you guys for coming. And yeah, hopefully see you guys next week. I'll stick around for a little bit if people have any questions, but otherwise, yeah.
All right.
We can practice our high five.
Yes. 1, 2,
Wait.
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
I think we should do that offline.
No, I think we should boomerang that shit and put it on Instagram.
This is what you missed, everyone.
All right. Cool.
All right. I am going to end the broadcast.
All right.
Here we go.